Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode here at Bulletproof Selling. My name is Sean Rhodes. I'm the Chief Sales Sergeant of Bulletproof Selling and author of the book Bulletproof Selling, a guide for systemizing sales on the battlefield of business. And here at Bulletproof Selling, our mission and mantra has always been that hope is not a sales strategy. So we are here for multiple years now, over 100 episodes, helping salespeople and their leaders solve that problem of where we're relying on hope, how to remove it, what to replace it with, so that we can sell more, but more importantly, so that we can serve more. My time as a Marine Corps war correspondent put me in front of some of the highest performing teams in the military. My job was to study how these men and women removed hope from the battlefield. And when I got into sales, I realized not only was I relying on hope more than I should, but every team that I got to work with was relying on hope more than they should. Even if they were having the best year ever, there's still opportunity to serve more, still opportunity to sell more. So since day one, we've been bringing on guests here, Hall of Fame speakers, best-selling authors, folks that are leading sales teams all around the world to discover where are we seeing folks reliant on hope. And then out of every one of these episodes, we build a sales system that you can use no matter the size of your goals or the size of your team to remove hope from how you sell as well. Now, across all of my guests, my probably favorite ones are my military veterans. These are the men and women out there that have learned firsthand the value of systems and process and how they can help us overcome even extremely stressful environments where there's a lot up in the air, environments that are constantly changing. So when I ran into today's guest, somebody that got to serve in Afghanistan, got to serve for my parent branch in the U.S. Navy. In case you didn't know, U.S. Marines are a department of the Navy. We call it the men's department. That's an inside joke. You'll get it here in a minute. But this gentleman really impressed me with his ability to take the initiative to not just hope that success happens, but to create success wherever he went. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome onto the show Mr. Timothy Kuehn, the VP of Global Sales and Supply Chain at ITS. Tim, welcome, sir, to Bulletproof Selling.
Hey, thanks, John, and really happy to be on and looking forward to this today.
So Tim, one of the chief complaints that I hear about the military is that they don't really do a good job of preparing us for the civilian world, let alone stepping into business, let alone stepping into sales. So love to hear about kind of your military experience. You've got one or two cool stories that I know I want to share with the audience, but then how you found your way into sales and leading a sales team. So talk to us about you, man.
Sure, absolutely. So, was a Naval Aviator, flew the P-3 Orion, and that was an absolutely wonderful experience. Now, my last 3 years on active duty, I was on staff in Japan, CTS 72. So, working for an admiral, and that was selling and being on a staff. And what I mean by that is I'm going both to other, U.S. military units and functions, and even to foreign allies. And I'm selling the platform. I'm selling our capabilities. I'm selling how we can work together. One of my my biggest collateral, which is like kind of your secondary job there, but it was almost a full-time job, was working with the JMSDF, the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force. Their Navy, they flew to P3, same as us. So I'd go flying with them, but we really rolled out this great initiative to enhance our coordination, which was, basically the big one we did is we set up a mobile command center across the street from a Japanese, I can't remember exactly what it's called, about 15 years ago, their command center. So that, instead of doing email or, trying to do a phone call, getting the secure email going back, I can just walk over there and they can show me, or they can walk over to here and I can show them and just figure that out. So that was it, and that's what I figured out when I, joined the private sector was selling is solutions at the end of the day. Right. And, and that's what this staff work was there's a problem, higher headquarters, our ally, whoever it is, they have a problem. How can we use our platform? How can we use our expertise to solve their problems? It gets so beaten into you, so, I got out, did, and then I got that really fun phone call back in 2012, which said, "Hey, sir, coming back to active duty." I'm like, cool. This was, back in the period of time where, basically the Navy and the Army had an agreement that the Navy would provide X number of bodies every year. And so, based on my rank and security clearance, I ended up as officer in charge of a thing called TACDOMEX, Tactical Document Media Exploitation. So basically, anything captured on the battlefield, cell phones, scraps of paper, we still seen burned CDs back then.
Yeah.
We're going through it for immediate actionable intelligence, and then we're putting it all into this big database of doing that, trying to figure out what's going on. So I'm out in Afghanistan running a team out there. Well, turns out there wasn't a lot of work to do out there. They were, even back then, they were kind of trying to shift more to our Afghan partners. So we couldn't share a lot of our results with the Afghans, so they didn't bring us a lot of stuff they found. Understandable. So I'm sitting there in Kandahar, which is at that time was a base of about 30,000 people, and I'm doing some back of the envelope math. I'm like, man, it is costing a lot of money for me to be sitting here for a year. And I said, I'm normally a taxpayer. And dang it, I want my money's worth. I'm going to the gym 2 hours a day. It's fun. All I'm doing is eat, sleep, work, and work out. And I said, well, what am I going to do? Well, I put that salesman's hat back on. I ordered some templates for business cards. And I made up business cards. And I just started inviting myself to any meeting on base where I thought there was somebody who could use my team's skills. Because one thing we could do is we could kind of look through somebody's phone and figure out, hey, who are you talking to? Are you talking to bad guys? Or are you following the same kind of pattern as a bad guy? A lot of what we actually ended up doing more was kind of corruption, with foreign contractors, construction, padding bills, and things like that. So yeah, I'm going around and just basically selling myself and selling my team. And, and we ended up getting pretty busy and doing some stuff that wasn't in our core mission, but I'd like to think that we made a small contribution to keeping people, safer, hopefully, running some of the things going there a little more efficiently and maybe just a tiny bit less corruption. I'm not going to fool myself into, how big the impact was. I remember, some of the Army folks actually that worked with, one thing I did that always ticked them off is I always referred to everybody as customers. Even when I was being mobilized, I was like, hey, I found a couple new customers. Say, sir, they're supported commands. I'm like, to me, they're customers. But
I'm working for them.
So that was a great experience.
With your time then out of the military, now you're leading a team in a kind of unique industry. So talk to us a little bit about the team you're leading and what they sell.
Sure. So what ITS does, and this is the industry I found in 2009, and I kind of stumbled onto it. I went to this hiring conference and, discovered this company. It's no longer around. So it was called AeroTurbine. But what we essentially did and what we still do is there reaches a point in time in a commercial aircraft or engine's life where it's worth more in pieces than it is whole. So, it starts with doing an analysis, but, you purchase the asset, you tear it down, basically. You remove the parts, you identify the parts, you identify where they came from, and then you use FAA certified repair stations, the same ones that the airlines use for their own parts, and you get those parts overhauled or recertified, and then you sell them back to the airlines and those repair stations to support their fleet. Once you kind of hit that critical mass, let's call it about 10 to 15 years into that platform's life, it starts to become a viable source of spare parts for the airlines and can drive pretty good savings. And so that's what I did. I started off as an asset manager. So that I was the geek back in the office with the spreadsheet, doing that model, saying, okay, well, if I buy an aircraft for X, and I'm going to spend Y on repairing the parts, I think I'm going to sell them for Z. Here's my cash flow, here's my timing, here's my gross margin, and then do that. And then it was my job and my team's job to make sure we had the parts on the shelf, ready to go and price, so our outside sales team could go out and monetize them and sell them to the customer. Now, we did a decent amount of selling ourselves as well, and that was kind of more the inbound sales. One interesting thing about our industry is because it's pretty small, pretty niche. None of us own a huge portion of it. I don't know how. Probably the biggest person in our space maybe owns 5% of the market, and I think that's probably being generous. Yeah. So a company can go from being a vendor to a customer to a competitor all in the same day, because we might have the same customer, but they might have a customer that I either can't do business with. I'm not on their approved vendor list. Maybe they're under contract with that vendor. Maybe I choose not to do business with that customer. Maybe we feel they're too much of a credit risk or something else like that. And so that other company might have that. But conversely, I might be on an approved vendor list, with an airline that, that same company isn't. So I might be trying to buy one part from that company. Well, to serve my customer, they're trying to buy another part from me to serve their customer. And then sometimes we're both quoting, a third airline that we're both on that approved vendor list, and we both have that same part in stock ready to go. So that makes it very
you're in a
dynamic
type
and
of
very
industry
interesting.
where your folks are they waiting for the call that, hey, we're airline X, or we're representing airline X as a vendor, we need that part now? Or are your folks responsible for generating that, through outbound dials? Talk to us a little bit about that sales cycle.
Yeah. Well, certainly that is a challenge, and that is a risk, which is that proverbial sitting there and waiting for the phone to ring. And there's a good amount of our business that comes from that, just because our customer base is, a lot of them are going to buy on demand now, because that's part of the value add and the cost savings we do, is they don't have to hold these parts in stock. Now, each of these airlines is going to balance that, right? They're going to look at the reliability rates of these parts. In the industry, it's called mean time between unscheduled removal. So you look at, so you might have, certain parts, especially, let's say, if it spins or actuates, like a starter, a fuel pump or something like that, it's probably coming off wing more often than like a radio or a transponder or something like that. Something that's a solid state electronic. And those are going to be a lot more reliable. So they're going to be looking at, where are their spares, what are critical parts, meaning, go, no go items, like, hey, if this isn't working, this plane can't dispatch. Then there's go if, we can dispatch it, but maybe it can only fly a certain profile, or I have so many days, it's a redundant system, something like that. So they're always balancing that and fine tuning their inventory levels, where they want those parts and how they want them. And that kind of changes that whole sales cycle as well. So, there's kind of really two parts that make us kind of unique versus other B2B is, the longer, more traditional B2B portion is still going out there and prospecting, finding customers. There are new airlines starting up every day, getting in there, making sure we're on their approved vendor list. Obviously, because we're selling, parts that go on airplanes that are, flying at hundreds of miles an hour, 40,000 feet in the air. We're pretty heavily regulated. And so, our customers are going to want that assurance that, that we're following proper procedures, that our parts are reliable, are documented, that we can, account for their life and where they've been and what they've done. And so, getting on that list can sometimes take a while. And we might, be looking at any time, pitching and trying to land longer term contracts. So, we might either, it might be guaranteed pricing levels, and or it might be guaranteed delivery and availability. So, a customer might say, hey, I will buy everything therefore I want a discount. Conversely, at times, especially post-COVID with a lot of supply chain issues, the value to the customer might be, I will pay a premium, but I want you to guarantee that you will always have the spare part I need available when I need it.
And that means that's overhead for you, because you have to hold it. So I'm really curious to get an answer to this, because although you mentioned that you're in a unique industry, and I agree you are, not very many people are selling airline parts, but something that a lot of salespeople deal with is trying to generate more demand. And that's something that we use outbound for a lot, but I know that you believe that there is another way. So I'm curious to get an answer to this question from you. In your industry, with the teams you lead, because there's, like 100 at least companies doing what you do, where do those salespeople rely on hope more than they should in this sales cycle that you're talking about, where they're kind of waiting for the phone to ring?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the big one is, is a salesperson sitting there just waiting for the phone to ring. So there are a few ways you can try to, generate that demand. And I'm going to focus now just on my account managers, the ones who are handling the day-to-day selling activity. One of that is kind of that hierarchy of, why an airline is going out and buying a part. So the most urgent is when there's something called AOG, aircraft on ground, meaning if I don't get this spare part, I'm not going to be able to dispatch this flight. I'm going to miss a revenue flight. And, especially now the way their flight schedules, the pilot schedules are, one aircraft not flying can have a ripple effect through their flight schedule, even up to multiple days in a worst case scenario. So there's a lot of value there. The other one is, we will get parts that are part of an ongoing maintenance activities. Lots of times something called a AD or airworthiness directive. So, an extreme example would be several years ago when there was a separated fan blade on a Southwest Airlines flight, and and that so the big fan on the front of a turbofan, and it separated. So there was requirements to, over a certain period of time, to do an immediate inspection, do recurring inspections to make sure it didn't happen again. Obviously. And there's other things that might be that. So, for less extreme, there might be a part that right now the airline needs to inspect it every 500 hours or every 1,000 hours, whatever it is. We have a part that has gone through the process dictated by the FAA in this case. That means if they replace their part with ours, they don't have to do that recurring inspection anymore.
Right.
So, that's a value add. And that is something where, we'll have the sales team go out and push that. And you got to know your customer, right? So if it's a part that goes on an Airbus A320, then we don't need to go push that part to Southwest Airlines, who only fly 737s, right? So that's where knowing that customer is, and so that will be. And then I'm a big believer in not duplicating the effort. So we would have the asset managers, and I'll step in there because I own both sides of that equation here. We'll put together a little marketing pack for that, which would be, not just the actual paperwork that goes to the part. There's something called an 8130, which is the FAA document where whoever the regulated authority is who repaired and certified that part to be airworthy, that does that. There's a teardown report, which is going to show all of the work that was performed on that part to make it airworthy. There's what's called the commercial trace, which is kind of pedigree of the part, which is what aircraft was it removed from, when was it removed, why was it removed, and kind of that history of the part. Some parts are traced what we call back to birth, meaning especially engine critical parts. I mean, I can tell you what engine it was installed on, when, how many hours and cycles that engine operated, when that engine went in for maintenance. Maybe that part was removed, repaired, and put back on that same engine, was run at different thrust ratings with different airlines or different airplanes, and all that. And we can account for all of it because some of those parts are, once they've accumulated a certain number of hours and cycles, they're dead. You have to scrap.
So for all the listeners out there, because I know Tim is basically breaking down like how to actually run his business model, in that maybe you don't fly airplanes, maybe you don't sell airplane parts, but I want you to understand the value as a listener of what he's telling you, because it's the solution to the problem that so many of us in sales face, which is, how do we just stop waiting for the phone to ring? How do we begin generating that demand when most of the time somebody has to actually have a need for what we sell for us to be able to sell it? It's not something that is an evergreen product that everybody in the world needs. And a lot of us, including myself, are in that market. So Tim, if the problem we're facing with hoping is that the phone rings, and I know what you just told us was that, hey, we have a process to solve that problem. And the differentiator is in the process that we use to generate better quality, generate more availability, all the things that you talked about. So let's build a system that any salesperson could use to solve this problem of waiting for the phone to ring. And when we do that, just like we had in the military, a lot of acronyms that we used. I know in the Navy and the Marine Corps, we had an acronym for just about everything. Well, we use an acronym here as well every time we build systems, because as on the battlefield, every new system trims away more hope from how we operate. Every new system in sales trims hope away from how we sell. So we use this acronym TRIM. The T in TRIM is the trigger. So if I'm attempting to solve the problem of hoping that the phone is going to ring by using my process, how we sell, as a differentiator, when would I trigger this system, Tim? Or when would you recommend that your salespeople do it? Is it as soon as we have a product that we can sell? Is it when we get in contact with a customer for the first time? When does this system trigger so that I can begin selling my process as a differentiator in this sale?
So for the scenario I walked you through just before, the trigger would probably be once we have a firm idea of when that part will be available. Especially again, post-COVID. And I was just at a conference last week where we all agreed we were going to stop saying post-COVID, but I'm saying post-COVID. So, I mean, the lead times are getting longer and longer, and the time to repair that part, because the shops are backed up, because throughout COVID, nobody was spending anything. Everybody just went to cash conservation mode. People deferred a lot of maintenance, and then they got backed up. It's piece parts, it's personnel. I mean, we could talk about that for hours, and we don't have time for that. But what that means is one thing that is incredibly important to my customers is accurate delivery dates. And so I don't want to go start marketing a part or something, and then it's actually, and I think it's going to be available in 30 days, and it turns out it's going to be available in 90, 120,
Right.
180. It's frustrating for the customer. It screws up their planning and doing that. It's also a burden on my organization. I tell the folks, when we sell stuff on lead time like that, you're signing yourself up for a series of phone calls, emails, where's my part? Where's my part? Where's my part? Which then triggers through our organization, going to our vendors, going, where's my part? Where's my part? Where's my part?
And nobody wants to deal with all of that. So,
right. It takes away from that. So that's my long answer to the first one is I know it's available. I have a good idea about what the actual saleable condition is and when it's going to be, I'm going to be able to deliver it.
And so then for all the salespeople out there that they're in a variety of business models, it sounds like once we know we have the inventory and we know what date it can be reliably delivered, that's when to trigger this system. Because again, you're moving inventory. And I don't care if you're selling products or you're selling services, you have inventory. If you're selling a service, your inventory is the amount of days that you are available to deliver this thing, or that your team can deliver whatever it is that you sell. So that's a great trigger, Tim. I want to move into the R in this acronym, which is making this a repeatable process. So although this could be a 20-step thing, especially in your industry where you have so many regulations, you have to meet so many differentiators that could be applied. If I was going to break this down into 4 or 5 steps, what are the 4 or 5 things that I want to execute predictably on every customer, on every sale, that allows me to position my process as a differentiator? What are those 4 or 5 things I need to do?
Sure. So I'm a big believer in just doing it once. And not having multiple people. And so what I've seen other organizations do is each individual salesperson would put together that information for their customer. And that's just kind of wasted time. Rather, I want to pick the right person within the organization to do that. And first thing we're going to do is we're going to put together all that documentation in the way that our customers expect to see it and in a way that they can easily review it and make sure it matches what they need. Which is both, commercially, by price and availability, but also, does it meet their engineering standards? Does it meet their trace? Like some airlines will only take certain parts from a domestic, a 121 operator. Other airlines will take it from any airline. Some might just have a very small blacklist. Right now, anything with Russian trace, obviously, is, it can be a bit dicier right now. And doing that.
So if I've got my first step, then
do it once.
Template the information in a way that the customers need to see it. What's the second step?
And then it is, have kind of a template or something to write up. Let's call it a script. Let's call it a couple of talking points and bullet points. Hey, Mr. Customer, Miss Customer, this is why we think this part will address a need you have, such as, this one, it would bring your aircraft into AD compliance, for example. Or it can be a lot simpler. It can just be, look, this is a very high demand part. We know, or let's say I've just gotten this part in. Remember, I don't have a lot of depth of stock. It's how many aircraft and engines can I buy to go tear down? So, that's the other thing. Because we record all incoming demand, whether we can fulfill it or not, we might say, hey, I just got this starter that goes on a 737. Hey, let's go back at every customer who's come out and looked to buy one in the last 3 months. And let's go to them and say, hey, I have this starter. It's going to be available in 20 days. You have high demand. We know the part. We know it's always in high demand. Are you interested in locking this thing up now, getting a purchase order in so that, you will get it as soon as we get it back from the shop? So, that's the other thing. So, and you write that out once, because remember, our salespeople are out there and they're selling across multiple platforms, multiple applications, things like that. So they're a little bit more of a generalist. Whereas I have folks over on my supply chain team who are experts within certain ATA chapters and segments of the aircraft. So they're the ones who are going to help educate the salespeople and understand some of the details behind that part.
Okay, so I've got template the information, develop talking points that your folks can use. Let's make step 3 something specific to describing how our process differentiates us. And in your industry, that might be around safety, meeting compliance and certifications, all of that fun stuff. But if I'm a salesperson just selling in general, how would you advise them begin to work their process into the sales conversation as a differentiator?
Yeah. Well, I think one of our biggest selling points is that we just have an absolute top notch. We call them customer ops, but our after sale service and support, which is that once that sale is booked, and we have a very strong process. We have an incredible warehouse and QC team here, and so what it means is to make sure that order gets dispatched quickly, efficiency, and right the first time. All the paperwork is right. The ship to address is right. When we said it's going to get, shipped on this day, it gets shipped on this day. It doesn't delay delivery to the customer. I think that's the big one. On top of what we already kind of covered under R is about making sure when we present that part to the customer, we've given them everything they need to make a decision, both on the commercial aspect, on the engineering, and on the quality. A less efficient model, especially, what a lot of people, did, when I first joined the industry back in 2009, 2010, it would be, airline comes out for a quote. Hey, here's my price. And they say, yeah, your price looks good. Let me see the 8130. Here's the 8130. Okay, well now, hey, my engineering needs to see the teardown report. Okay, well, here's the teardown report. All this back and forth. And what really cemented to me was when I ran a sales team in Singapore with a company headquartered in Miami. And if I let my sales team get into that habit, we were never in the office at the same time as headquarters, the folks who actually were the experts on that information.
So your sales cycle would proactively do it. I can already see where that goes. Yeah.
It becomes a multiple day. Remember, there's times in this industry where my sales cycle is measured in minutes. Mm-hmm. You got the customer on the phone or, quick email, you give them everything. They need it now. They're like, yep, everything looks good. Boom. I'm going to send you a PO. Done. And so, yeah,
I love it. That's the big part. I want to make sure folks have these steps then written down, or remember them. If you're a salesperson out there, on the treadmill, you're in traffic right now. Template the information that your folks need to make a decision. Develop talking points that speak to the fact you have that information already prepared. And then the third step is use your service and support team. And maybe that's you if you're also responsible for delivering what you sell, but maybe you're in a company that has a service and support team. Use that as a differentiator to say, here's how great we are at doing this. And this is, while you may have a slightly better price somewhere else, what they're not going to be able to bring you is this. And then the I in trim, Tim, is the ability to improve this. So just like on the battlefield, we learned through Desert Storm how to do things differently in Iraq the second time and in Afghanistan. The improvement piece, you already provided one of these, which is, did we provide everything that the customer needed to make a decision? And that's absolutely something that we can assess to improve it. Is there anything else that you would recommend we do to improve using our process as a differentiator?
Yeah, I think another big one is also understanding what the customer's internal review process looks like, and can we tailor what we're doing to them? So, again, years ago in a previous role, we serviced a U.S. airline that had a fairly small approved vendor list, but we had folks on site who worked at that airline, and they did that. So we got to a point, if we were selling a flight critical part, like those life limited parts I was discussing earlier, our on-site reps would actually get the paperwork that needs to sign off, put it in a folder, and they would actually walk it from person to person who need to sign off on this stuff to make it, because that's feedback I get from some customers now from the buyers is, we're saying, look, the buyer has agreed to the price, everything looked good, they've issued a PO, but we're waiting for their internal review process to sign off on it. And so as the buyers are saying, look, I'm waiting on them too. And so, that's where you can improve that there is understanding what does that customer's process look like and how can I adjust what I'm presenting to them to match the way they do business.
I love that. That's a great way to do it. And then
don't try to make the customer do.
Trim, then the final element where we measure the results here is the ability for us to say, is this a better system than what I was using before in waiting for the phone to ring? So if I'm using my process as a differentiator by reaching out and actually selling that, not just a part of the service, but selling the differentiator is the process. One thing you mentioned was to measure demand. So is the demand increasing for what I sell? Because that's something that we can use to measure and adjust our process and our outbound with. What is another thing that you recommend we measure to see, is this system better than what I was doing before, waiting for the phone to ring?
Yeah, I think the two of the biggest metrics are going to be response time, which is, I mean, which is the inbound again, but the inbound is always going to be a part of this process. You can't separate one from the other. I can't solely wait for the phone to ring, and I can't solely go proactively push parts. They both are, the yin and the yang of how we do business. So response time is a big one. How fast are we getting back to that customer? Because again, that airline buyer has a stack in their inbox of this is stuff they got to go find today. All right. They don't have time to do reworks or ask follow-up questions or do that. And, they're going to move really quick. They're going to find the viable product at, an acceptable price. They're going to purchase it. They're going to move on to the next one. The other one is going to be our fill rate. And I guess that there's two parts to that. So one is how much can we quote? Okay. So of the 100 parts a week that airline A is looking to buy, I was able to, provide them a solution for 80%. I mean, and the metrics can vary based on the customer and the platform. Again, because I don't have everything on the shelf.
Right.
Way you do it, but you certainly want to see that higher rate. I've seen that in the past is that, the customers where I can provide a higher quote rate tend to have a higher purchase rate as well. Just think of it again from that buyer's perspective about ease of use. Okay. Let's say they're going out and they're trying to buy a package of 20 parts. Do they want to cut, 10 purchase orders to 10 different vendors? Or would they like to get it down to 2 or 3 purchase orders? So if everybody just quotes 2 of the 20 parts they're looking for, man, that's a lot more work, right? That's a lot of purchase orders, tracking orders, invoices, everything doing that. So how complete can we quote? And then, finally is going to be what's our win rate, right? What's our quote to sales ratio?
Yeah, ultimately, how much are we selling? That does make a difference. So it's really fascinating. Then you're establishing a way to use not sexier parts and service, not necessarily a better quality product, because a lot of, like you said, the folks in your industry were sourcing from the same pieces of equipment. But what we can use as a differentiator is how much better can we guarantee that this is going to be an easier process for you to buy what it is that you need, or that you think you need, or that you're going to need in the future. So Tim, great end-to-end system for using process as a differentiator. I want to give people the opportunity to connect with you, with ITS. How do we get deeper into your world, sir?
Oh, that's great. So, our website is its.aero, its.aero, Alpha Echo Romeo Oscar, for those of you who are into that. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty sure I'm the only, Tim, we never mentioned my last name, so I'm not gonna be upset that you mispronounced my last name, because nobody ever gets it right, which is Kuehn.
Kuehn.
Don't ask me how, umlaut became a UE, became Kuehn. Because I go to Germany, and the problem is I look like I speak German, and I don't. And, everybody says, Herr Kuehn, and I go, well, oh, wait, I'm in Germany. Yeah, I'm Herr Kuehn. But yeah, it's Tim Kuehn, Kuehn. Type that into LinkedIn. You'll see my smiling face, and on there. And for those in the aviation industry, our inventory is on Aero Exchange, ILS, PartsBase, the usual online listing services. Won't mean much to your wider audience, but any of the niche, anybody who followed my LinkedIn post yesterday and wanted to hear me talk, they know what I'm talking about there.
They do indeed, sir. We'll make sure that we're tagging you across LinkedIn. That folks, anybody looking for Tim Kuehn, you're definitely going to see that on the LinkedIn release of this episode. So for those of you that are catching this live stream, make sure you're subscribing to the YouTube channel, Bulletproof Selling. And of course, if you are listening on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, make sure you're leaving us a review. Let other salespeople know that hope doesn't have to be part of their sales strategy. Even if you're in a competitive market, you can still use your process as a differentiator. Tim, thanks so much for giving back to our country with your service, giving back to the sales community today with your insight. Let's get out there, sir, and make selling bulletproof.
Thanks, Sean. Really enjoyed it.